Right. Here we are. I'm Dr. Bill.
And I have Professor Gene.
There we go. And this is the Bioactive Nexus podcast. We got a pretty good show for you today. We're going to talk about mandatory product listing. So it's a hot topic for sure. And, especially with Senator Dick Durbin's announcement this week, he's going to try and push that forward. But we're going to go through that in great detail. And by the way, if you want to join, there's a public link that you can join our chat. And let me put that in the on the screen here. Let's make sure that works. And yeah, I think you see that, Gene, right?
Yeah, sure do.
Oh, hold on, let me put it on for longer there. It only goes 20 seconds max, but you can copy that link and they can join our chat if you want for this podcast. So I'm sure it's a hot topic. Maybe some folks that are listening live will have some questions.
Cool.
So while that's up there, anyway, I'll put that up there again in case somebody missed it. We'll do that again. But let's go through a few announcements first. Again, you can follow our website at thebioactivenexus.com. You can subscribe there. Also follow our LinkedIn page, the Bioactive Nexus on LinkedIn. And then, of course, we have a YouTube page, Facebook page. We have a small following there, but we don't have enough followers yet, Gene, on Facebook. We'll have to build that. And we have some followers on YouTube, actually, too, which is kind of cool. So we're streaming out to those. And let's see. Guys, I'm still in the search for an executive position in the industry, so I'm available. Contact me. So if somebody's out there, let me know. And Gene, you've got any announcements from your side?
Yeah, so I wanted to mention a couple of things. One, I'm going to be conducting a couple of education sessions at Supply Side West.
That's right.
One is a panel discussion called Healthy Aging, the Biology, Chemistry, and Technology of Adding Quantity and Quality Years. And my particular job in here is to discuss those specific nutraceuticals that address a range of different aging-related health issues. So that should be really interesting, and that's taking place on the Monday there at Supply Side. And then on Wednesday, I'm going to be doing a breakfast session called The Next Nutraceutical Rock Stars for Abdominal Fat, Athletic Performance, Sexual Health, and Sleep. And that'll take place. Yeah.
It's a big spectrum, man.
That's a big spectrum. That's right. And so it's going to cover all of that. And that should be a really, really interesting one. And so, just letting everybody know, feel free to go online. The one I just mentioned, you have to register for. I don't think you have to register for the first one on Monday. And I just wanted to tell you about that. So that's my announcements.
Cool. And speaking of Supply Side, we will be broadcasting live from Supply Side West. We don't know where yet or the time, but we'll let you know as soon as we know. We're working the details out on that. And the goal for that is as live, because the streaming from there, we learned from others that have tried to do this, is the internet connection is not stable enough. But so it will be like live. We're going to record it, but we're going to send out some invites for a bunch of folks from the industry since everybody's there, right, Gene? So it's like, see if they want to stop by and just chat. And we just kind of do quick little impromptu interviews and stuff like that. So that's our plan for Supply Side on that. And then our karaoke after party for Supply Side on the Thursday the 31st is all booked up, sorry to say. But if you still want to join that, you can go on a wait list. Sometimes people cancel.
Just send us an email, or send us a message on LinkedIn and we'll put you on the list.
Yeah, and we'll put you on the list. We already have some on the wait list already, actually. And that's kind of exciting. Who knew we had that many singers in the industry out here?
Well,
so
next year we will make a bigger
splash. We'll get some big sponsors, make it a big event or something like that.
That sounds good.
It'll be fun. So anyway, that's that. And then one last announcement. I launched my podcast last Sunday, Where Spirit Meets Science. I was in Sunday mornings. That's going to be on Sunday mornings, by the way, weekly. I wasn't sure if I was going to do that or not, or bi-weekly, but yeah, we're going to do it weekly because it's something I'm already doing every week anyway. So again, this Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific on Sundays. I will be doing that streaming live here to LinkedIn. And also
Cool.
to Facebook as well. So definitely join us for that. All right. Without further ado, let's jump into our very hot topic.
Really is a hot topic right now.
It really is mandatory product listing. Holy cow. So let's put some context, but we're going to go through some context and current legislation and all that just real briefly, just so we have context to that. And then we'll go through the for and against and all the arguments to that. And then we'll sum it up at the end here. How's that sound, Gene? We'll do that.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah. So again, it's a huge market, guys. So the U.S. market is a $56 billion market in 23, and definitely over 100,000 products on the market today.
Oh, yeah.
So I have to say, and we're going to speak very unbiased about this in terms of the pros and cons here, because I at least from my position, Gene, is that a lot of our industry likes to blame the FDA for not using the current legislation and not following it. But you know what? We need to be more responsible as an industry as well. And we don't do a very good job at that either. And we'll talk about some of those things in detail here, but as we get to those points. So I think before we start calling names and calling the kettle black here, you ought to take a look in your own backyard and make sure that you're actually following and doing everything you're supposed to be doing. So let's not be, beat up the FDA. This is not a beat up the FDA session, by the way. Okay, this is like calling out the, just like we are with the science. It's about the science. If the science is there, great. If it's not, Jeannie and I aren't going to talk about it. So it's the same thing here. We're going to be unbiased about this.
All right. So, Dick Durbin, what do you want to tell us about the current situation? It's not the first time that he's tried to get this thing.
He did this in 22. And look, everybody knows this, and we're not going to go through in a lot of details in this. But look, it's what I don't like is if I had $1 for every time somebody said our industry is unregulated, I'd be a rich man right now. But the truth is, that's not the case. And it's a little bit.
Just wrote an article about that recently.
Yeah, and it's a bit of grandstanding on Durbin's part. Sorry, there's politicians. I don't like any politicians, quite frankly, and let's not get into politics here. But for crying out loud, oh my God, it's unregulated. Tianeptine is on, is illegal dietary supplement. No, it's not.
It's an adulterate drug. It's like saying that a product that's sold for sexual health that they spiked with Viagra is that's an adulterated. It's not a dietary ingredient. It's a drug. Same thing.
Right.
Same thing with this. And so it has nothing to do with it. That's a bad player spiking it. That's not a reason.
No, it's not a reason. And actually, we've had bad actors doing crap like that and adulterating for years. So but this is just
far and few between if you look at the totality of the medications.
Exactly. And so this is like same thing. It has nothing to do with mandatory product listing, which we're going to talk about in detail. But, it's important to understand what kind of regulatory model we follow. So the U.S., and I've done training on this. I worked for a global company. I did regulatory training for multiple countries and stuff, and every country is different. The U.S. is a post-market surveillance model, right? So by default, it's a reactive model, right? Because they're not, FDA or FTC are not going to step in until they see something happen, right? There's no proactive. I think it's an oxymoron to say the government is proactive, right? Would you say? I mean,
yeah, absolutely. But by the way, before we get too far, if you indulge me for just a moment, for anybody out there who wants to say that our industry is unregulated, I'm going to give a really, really quick rundown, not just a list. I'm not even going to explain what each of them are, but I'm going to I'm just going to state the laws and regulations currently governing our industry.
All right, go for it.
The Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act of 1938, the Nutritional Labeling and Education Act of 1990, the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act of 1994, the Food and Drug Administration Modernization Act of 1997, Current Good Manufacturing Practices, the Public Health, Security, and Bioterrorism Preparedness and Response Act of 2002, the Consumer Health Information for Better Nutrition Initiative of 2003, the Food Allergen Labeling and Consumer Protection Act of 2004, the Dietary Supplement and Non-Prescription Drug Consumer Protection Act of 2006, the Food Safety Modernization Act of 2011. So, somebody says, oh, we're not regulated. We are. The issue isn't we need more regulations. The issue has to do much more with enforcement of those regulations. So I just wanted to make that case. So thanks for indulging me.
No, I love it. Try saying that 3 times fast, man.
I thought I did a pretty good job saying it fast.
You did great. But yeah, look, I've done training, regulatory training for companies and stuff like that on our regulations here. And look, they're not perfect, but you know what? They're pretty damn good the way they are. I mean, yes, we could use some improvements in there. The real issue is resources. The FDA doesn't have the resources. I mean, look, they can't even inspect in 1 year. I've seen this from the FDA's data themselves present this, and this is pre-COVID, where they were only reaching 500 manufacturers a year that they would do site visits. Well, there's obviously way more than that.
Thousands.
I don't know. Yeah, there's tons of people.
Yeah, it's a fraction of. I've had the same experience, Bill, where I've talked to when I've worked at companies where the FDA came visiting, and I'd say, "How come you're not going after this guy? How come you're not going after that guy?" and so forth in the industry. And they were honest. They said, we don't have the personnel. There's not enough of us. We don't have the funding to get more people. That's what it is.
Right. And so, Gene, you and I have been around since DSHEA started, and we've seen the improvements they've made to the regulation. So
they have.
Yeah. And, DSHEA was 1994. And then in 1998 is when they came out with the guidance on structure function claims and the disclaimer that needed to go on labels. I know this firsthand because we were right in the middle of developing the central verbals that we were in about halfway through doing the product launch. And we had to change all the labels and everything in the claims. So I remember it very well. It was May of 1998 when that happened. And it's interesting because the disclaimer says, all right, this statement has not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. Okay, we can quote that on our slate. Now, but yet we're required to submit our claims.
Mandatory product listing with claims. So the question there before us, Bill, is
who evaluates?
If you're submitting it ostensibly for the purpose of evaluation, then is that statement now not a misstatement? Is it an inaccurate statement? I came up in an issue on LinkedIn with my friend Ivan Wasserman. Brilliant lawyer for our industry. So it's like he brought this up. It's like, oh my God, yeah, that's exactly true.
It's a bit of a disconnect. So
it is a disconnect. So then why?
Well, and then there's something further here, and I'm going to beat up on the industry on this one, guys. Okay, so from my own personal experience in this industry, I worked in my last role. Sanofi is a big biopharmaceutical company, big consumer healthcare division, multi-billion-dollar company. But I worked with their mergers and acquisitions group. It's public knowledge, so I'm not going to share anything confidential, but we were looking for acquisition targets in the U.S. market. We didn't have a brand or a footprint in the U.S. for supplements. So I can tell you, did due diligence on many brands, many that you would know, Gene, and we're talking 100 million plus brands. And I have to tell you that not one of those companies had submitted their claims to the FDA according to the regs. I was shocked. So before we start beating up the FDA if not regulated, if they don't do anything, whatever, submit your damn claims first of all.
Yeah, and then in a previous conversation, I know I shared with you that one company that I used to work for at that time, as we were coming out with some new products, and I was in charge of regulatory as well as product development. I said, okay, we got to submit these claims, and I said, okay, here's the lawyer that we deal with. Let's do it through them. And so I said, oh, okay. And the lawyer said, no, you don't want to do that. I'm like, what do you mean? It's regulation. You got to do it. He said, yeah, don't do it. Basically, here was the argument. If you do it, there's no penalty for not doing it. And if you do it and somebody said, well, no, we don't like it, you can't do it. You can't do it. So his position was do it, follow the rules, and don't do an egregious claim, but do your claim. And if they come eventually and say, this isn't any good, you can always remove it.
Right.
And so that was the position. And I'm like, oh, okay.
I mean, I think part of that has to do with some apathy on part of the industry. It's like, well, we submit that, but the FDA doesn't ever do anything with it. Well, no, they're not required to respond, which is why they have the disclaimer, by the way. This statement has not been evaluated. They're not going to say that they evaluated anything because that would give the impression of approval.
Right.
Right. So it's a legal thing to say we're not going to do that. It's a post-market surveillance model, yada, 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 all that. Yeah, you're supposed to make claims within the structure function claims, but I can tell you, I was shocked when I saw the number of companies, brands, anyone's listening to this will know that they didn't actually do this. And part of it is probably because why? Why do it? Well, one is the regulation, but why do it? Because what's the purpose of that? So look, the FDA has that information. So if we're putting this in context of mandatory product listing, yeah, they have that information already. Do they have it from everybody out there? Certainly not.
Oh, no. Not by a long shot.
Not by a long shot.
And by the way, I would just argue that the FDA could get around that with the disclaimer in terms of the mandatory product listing by just altering it so you just use the second sentence of the disclaimer that just says, this product's not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
That's an idea.
You don't even have to say that the statement has been evaluated. You don't even have to address that. You can just take that statement out.
Yeah, that's a modernization thing that could happen. Let's say we do have a product listing, which I think actually is a good idea if it's the right language. And
if it's the right language, and I agree. Conceptually, Bill, I have no problem with the idea of a mandatory product listing if the language is appropriate in that requirement. But that's where we're running into some problems in industry. And that is why, at this time, to the best of my knowledge, we are not getting, all of the trade organizations are not behind it as in its current form.
Right.
They're willing to be behind, some of them are willing to be behind it if the language has changed. Right. But some of them have problems with things like, you're trying to tie in a drug to this thing, which has nothing to do, to your point, has nothing to do with it. And there's other issues. And so,
well, and we would be remiss. So we talked about we've got lots of regs. Yeah, you're supposed to submit structure function claims. A lot of people don't do it. Let's be honest. And then there's the dietary supplement label database that's put out by NIH, which, by the way, NIH is not part of FDA. Okay, no. You have Health and Human Services, and then you have the branch that goes to NIH, and then you have the Office of Dietary Supplements. They're the ones that put out the label database. And actually, you can go there and you can see all the products of labels. You can filter it by market. You can do searching or whatever. And so, okay, that's fine, but that's really for the public to go look at. It's not really a great regulatory tool because who knows if those labels are updated or whatever. So is that a resource? Yes, it's a resource, but it's not a perfect system. That with structure function claims, you're going to try and put them together. So again, it doesn't work when we'll go through the arguments for and against. It's not a perfect system that what we have currently for the FDA to achieve what they want to talk about doing. So let's be honest about that. And then again, the FDA's mandate is about public safety, obviously, and all that. So let's go into more detail about the trade associations and who's what. Sure. I think everybody, first of all 5 were opposed by the Durbin's bill as it's worded. and I would agree with that as well.
As it's worded.
Yeah, and it doesn't really address. I mean, in a reasonable way, it's kind of common sense here, okay? But again, we need to take out the TNFT effect and the grandstanding about not regulated, because that's all bullshit. And let's talk about, what would that look like if it was for it to be right? What's the basic information? And is it burdensome to the industry? Come on, not really. So they argue, I'm jumping ahead on the arguments here, but
no problem.
But again, I don't know if we have to go through each of the 5 trade associations. We're talking APA, CRN, UNPA, NPA, and CHIPA, right? They all have different standings.
Different positions. You can summarize them by saying that the majority of them are not opposed to the concept of mandatory product listing.
Right.
But they're opposed to the bill as it's currently written. And with the exception of NPA, who just opposes the bill and feels that current legislation is sufficient, the others are like, I'm not opposed to the concept, just the way it's written at this time.
Right.
Which is kind of where I'm at. That's where I'm at too.
That's where I'm at too.
I'm not at all opposed to the concept. I like transparency. I like the fact let's have all the information out there.
Yeah.
As long as other kinds of inappropriate criteria aren't included in that will actually help the situation.
So let's go through in detail the pros and cons.
Yeah,
okay.
Let's do that.
All the arguments, and not the opinions, but the arguments.
Yeah.
For and against a mandatory product listing, if it was, whatever that looks like. So let's start with the pros. Okay. So I'll go through the first one here. The first is about one of the pros is that there would be enhanced consumer safety. Okay. So one of those points is transparency, right? It would require manufacturers to provide detailed information about their products, including ingredients, dosages, potential allergens, improving consumer safety and transparency. Okay. That's one thing. Okay. And then the second thing would be adverse event monitoring. Now, we already have legislation for adverse events. Every company is supposed to maintain a database of any adverse events for their product.
It's required.
Now, I sorry, I'm going to call out the industry again in this one. I can tell you that, again, from my experience, and again, it's a small subset, and I think the bigger responsible companies probably do this for sure, but there are a lot of companies that don't even do this. In fact,
you're right, Bill. I worked for a company before where I made sure that happened, and we would sit down, and we actually it was a big enough company, we actually had a nurse on staff, and she would review some of the reports for adverse events, and we would get together with her and the VP of sales, and we would have a group discussion regularly on each of these things. And are they an adverse event? Are they a severe adverse event? What has to be reported? Which somebody's saying, oh, I took this and it made me burp too much. Whatever, who cares?
And I've worked for big companies where we did have that infrastructure in place, and we gathered that sort of data. And most of the responses from consumers were nothing very serious at all. But everybody's different, so you have to take into account like what other people are taking, what their diet is, that sort of thing. These things start to factor into that because it can be complications in that.
Right. But to your point, the requirement exists. So my question is, does it in fact improve adverse event monitoring if it's required in here, but it's already required?
I would argue it's already required for companies to do that, but then how does the FDA? I don't see the connect in terms of how this actually helps them, because it's already required. It's already required. If you can't enforce it now, just repeating the requirement without enforcement. So we already supposedly in the real world, in an ideal world, we're submitting the product label, a website, the claims. You're already submitting this stuff according to the regs we have today. You already have that information, but that doesn't help you in terms of adverse event monitoring. That only happens if something happens. And that's really on the onus of the companies, the product brands who are marketing these products, to have that information. Okay, so
Agreed.
So I don't see. Yes, there's more transparency. The only additional thing that I would see that we don't already submit. Actually, I don't. It's a more formalized system. Maybe the only difference is, Gene, is that we already. I've done the submissions before, right? You submit your claims, the website, the label. That's all the information right there.
Right.
The only thing that has to happen is for the FDA to evaluate it and give you a letter for a receipt that says, yes, we've received your information, blah, 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 respond to that. That means they've evaluated that. So if I think about other countries where they require pre-registration before you can take it to market, see in our current regulations, you're supposed to submit your claims within 30 days after you go to market the product, right?
Right.
But in other markets, you have to submit all that stuff ahead of time, and the regulatory authorities say yes, or they may question something to change. Well, a lot of countries do that in the world already. Okay, the U.S. doesn't. I know we think it's like it's burdensome or whatever. It's like, actually, the onus is we already submit that. I think it just becomes more formalized, and the FDA responds in a way, right?
Yeah. If the second part were true, and the FDA did respond, and in a timely manner, like within 30 days or something. Yeah. Well, great,
and that happens in other markets where you have to do a pre-registration. They respond within a certain set period of time.
They do, and if they could do it in the dietary supplement industry, and we weren't the red-haired stepchild of healthcare, then that would be great.
Okay.
So how about regulatory oversight? Jump into that one?
Let's move on here. So regulatory oversight, that's the other pro for that. Okay, and so there's 3 points here on that one. First is market surveillance. Okay, so MPL would give the FDA a clearer picture of the market, allowing for more effective regulation enforcement against non-compliant, potentially dangerous products. Okay.
Yeah. I agree with that conceptually. I completely agree with it conceptually. But all of this is just dependent on, do you have the staff and the funding to do this? If you do, that's great. Because I think there's a lot of crap out there on the market that we would be better off as an industry if we got rid of it, and making egregious claims and doing stuff you're not supposed to do. Yeah, let's get rid of them. Let's get rid of the bad players. But you got to have somebody actually reviewing all that stuff. So
exactly.
Conceptually, I think it's a good idea.
Conceptually, yes. Okay, so again, it's a post-market surveillance model. But if we're submitting all this stuff, let's say we submitted, the FDA responds in a more formal way than what we already submit, actually, then, okay, how does that actually eliminate the bad actors? It doesn't really, because people are going to still do it. So, I'm going to raise an issue here, or point I've never heard anybody say of how do you enforce this? Because first of all, we all know that the FDA doesn't have the resources, okay? And if they were going to put this new legislation or whatever, great, but are they going to have the resources to do this? Okay, that's a really key point here, because if you don't have the resources, then we're just submitting the stuff. It's no different than what we're doing right now if the FDA is not interactive with industry and responding to that. But how about this? Let me propose something. All the retailers who sell supplements, whether it's the company themselves on their website, or whether it's on bricks and mortar shelf, or whether it's online, Amazon, let's just take Amazon. Amazon's the number one retailer for online. That's a fact, right? A majority of supplements that are sold online are on Amazon. So, Amazon obviously is doing a better job now in terms of requiring testing and certain things, whatever. But there's another checkbox now. Let's say we have mandatory product listing. The company has to say that we had the question for the retailer, whoever is selling it on the shelf, I don't care who it is, needs to ask the question, if it's somebody else's product they're selling, is your product listed with the FDA? And if it isn't, it doesn't go on the shelf. That stops it right there.
It certainly would. And again, if all of these...
Wait, one more point. And if they did that, then it gets back to that puts the onus on the industry the people who are selling the products not to sell crap and get penalized for that. Then you go after those people who do that.
Right.
Right.
No, that makes sense. And if the other thing were in line, which is that the FDA actually reviewed all that stuff and did it in a reasonable period of time, then, and only then, could you say, yeah, this is a requirement. We're going to put this up. It has to be listed before I'll take it in, because you know that is some level of insurance against a problem occurring. But if they haven't reviewed it, then no. And this is also in some ways consistent with something I recently wrote. I was invited to answer some Q&As for Radical Science's Trailblazer Tuesday events that they do. And they asked me, if there's one thing I could change about the industry, what would it be and why? And I was talking about, getting rid of the bad players. And what I wrote was, I'm not going to read it all, but I'll read this part. However, based upon my response to a previous question, I don't think that this will be accomplished by the FDA and FTC. Rather, I think that the good players should collectively call out the bad players, challenge them to provide substantiation for their bad products and claims they make about those products. And what you're talking about is kind of a way to sort of do that.
It's the mechanism for regulatory oversight, which is, okay, if you're going to go inspect manufacturers and FDA is going to do that, well, go inspect retailers. Go online to Amazon and make sure that every product that's being sold there is listed. And if it's not, well, then those companies that are selling it, regardless if it's their brand or a third-party brand, they get penalized for that. It's not listed. That will eliminate, in my view, it seems like that would eliminate the bad actors. Now, will you find every gas station or retailer in middle of nowhere, South Carolina, that's selling something? No, you're not going to catch that there. But you're going to do a better job if you have that sort of mechanism in place, I think, in terms of market surveillance. Yeah.
So another regulatory oversight area that we're looking at is quality control, with the concept of that this improved oversight could lead to higher standards of quality and safety in the industry, reducing the risk of contamination or mislabeling. Now, I've seen that, and to be honest with you, I'm not really sure how that improved oversight would lead to that.
I don't see that either.
I'm like, you're just listing it. That is an issue of testing the product, and it's not the product isn't tested. Just because it's listed doesn't necessarily change that. So that's a nice idea, but to me, it's a disconnect. I don't see it.
Yeah, I mean, there's one other piece of information that isn't in the current legislation is that if you submit the product label, it doesn't say who the manufacturer is. Okay, so
it doesn't.
I could see that could be useful for the FDA to know who's manufacturing it. I don't think that needs to be public knowledge, but because for proprietary reasons, people use contract. I mean, majority of products being sold, very few companies, only big ones, have their own manufacturer. And I can tell you from experience, even the big companies still use contract manufacturers.
Sure,
they don't
absolutely
always do it in-house. Okay, so there's always going to be a CDMO that's producing that, and you don't know who it is. Okay, so that I could see that could help.
More than one, more than one doing the same product.
Yeah, exactly. And so that would be important information to help the FDA in terms of their inspection routine, in terms of on-site visits and stuff like that. But that's the only. But I don't think you get to the quality piece, Gene, until you get to site visits of actual manufacturers, right? I mean, that's where the quality documents are. That's part of the inspections.
That's where they are.
So the listing doesn't provide that information except for if you know where it's being manufactured. Then you can go and check that out. But it doesn't tell you in the listing of the information. We're talking basic information. It's not going to tell you if it's meeting all the quality standards. You'd have to look at the batch records. You'd have to look at all the testing. You'd have to look at all that. And that's what the site visits are for. Okay. And then the last point in this regulatory oversight is, and I think I already said this, many other countries require some sort of listing and registration. So guys, we're not the only ones that have to do this. No, we don't want pre-market approval for anything, right? There's no need for that. Again, we're just talking about supplements. So we don't want to be ultra conservative like some other countries where they have their pre-market approval or registration of that. But yet, the legislation would be less restrictive than that. So it's not a pre-market approval. And again, it's a post-market surveillance regulatory model. Okay, that's the way the U.S. operates. And it's been pretty effective, I'd say. And yes, the industry's gotten bigger, whatever, and things fall through the cracks, but there's ways to tighten it up. So let's go to our last two
potential benefits for
pros for this. So industry accountability. Okay.
All
right. So there's 3 points to this. The first is deterrence of bad actors. Okay. Requiring a product listing could help deter unscrupulous manufacturers from entering the market. Okay, yes, if you have to submit the manufacturers, then yes, you would know who that is, and you'd know if that facility's GMP certified or whatever. So I could see that being important for the
if the actual manufacturers are required, because if it's just the company,
if it's just
the brand that's submitting that information, as it's currently, it's not really including that, so that's not going to help.
It's not going to help. You're still going to have. Again, I think the only way you can get to the bad actors is penalize the people who sell the products in the first place, whether it's online or whatever, the companies. If it's not listed, which means it checks all the boxes for other things we're talking about, but if it's not listed and a company is selling it, they get fined for that, steep fines, and then they won't sell the bad actor products. But okay, let's be devil's advocate. People set up a website and they sell online. This is true. This happens now. And they sell something, they're making wild claims or whatever. I don't see listing is never going to get rid of the bad actors. Any kind of mandatory product listing.
Because if they care that much about it and they're like, oh, it's going to deter me because people are going to know what I have in the product, they can buy it and see what you have in the product more or less.
More or less.
If they're being honest.
Now, again, it would help consumers if they had access. It was in a database or something. Again, we already have the dietary supplement label database. How many consumers actually know that exists? Probably no one. Okay. I mean, really,
I would say conservatively less than 1%.
A very small percentage of consumers actually know that it even exists, first of all. And by the way, Gene, I did a search in the database, and tianeptine, it comes up as a product on the market in the database. Wait a minute.
It's a drug.
But how the hell did it get its label in the database in the first place? Isn't anybody looking at this stuff? So this is my point where
apparently not.
That particular database does not solve the problem. Okay, because first of all, no one evaluated it. They just scanned the label and threw it up there because it said dietary supplement. That's it. Did anybody look to see if it's a bad ingredient? So actually, there's no way for the FDA to search that database and find a particular ingredient if it's being sold. It's only if it gets called out or something, right? It's not possible to identify that. So how would you know to search for a tianeptine and it was in the database if you didn't know? You don't know what you don't know, right?
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. So anyway, next point.
Level playing field. Mandatory product listing can create a more level playing field by ensuring that all manufacturers, regardless of size, adhere to the same regulatory standards. No. Okay. Again, how does that do that? Unless you listed, first of all, it keeps using the term manufacturer. Most people don't manufacture their own products.
No.
So how does this make a more level playing field? How does it even assure that they're adhering to regulatory standards, unless all you're evaluating is their supplement facts box? I mean,
it actually comes down to, again, what we already said, is that there has to be knowing who the manufacturer is helps. Okay, and then you have a database of the manufacturers. The FDA has it, and they can't even get to all the manufacturers to inspect them today as it is. So how do you filter through all that crap? Okay, so
you don't, and no. It's so the next point. I'm kind of like, okay, maybe it gives retailers the ability to screen products before putting them up for sale on their platforms or shelves. Yes, but you can still get that information anyway. I mean, most people who are going to sell a product in their store aren't going to say, "Sure, ship me a case." They're going to say, "Let me see it first. Let me see the label. Let me see something," before they do it. So they're going to have an ability to do that anyway.
Yeah.
But give the devil his due. That's a legitimate point. But so what? Kind of.
Well, it goes back to what I said before. It's like anybody that's selling the products. You just at least Amazon's taking some initiatives to do that as the biggest online retailer. All right, well, check to see the products in the listing in the database. They can do that check themselves, and the product brand who's submitting their product to sale doesn't get approved to sell it unless they're listed. So that is one way to screen it. But again, that can help eliminate bad actors if people are in the database and they don't get it online. But it doesn't stop some retailers from continuing to sell crap products that are bad. Okay, it doesn't prevent that unless you find those companies that do that, and you start doing that for a few companies out there. Then some people are going to think twice about that and selling a product that isn't listed. Let's say.
So the last.
Yeah.
The
consumer confidence. Okay, so there's 2 points here. This is for the pros for it. Okay. It would give the consumers informed choices. Okay, consumers would have access to more information about the supplements they're considering, leading to more informed purchasing decisions. Well, what?
Just because they are clearly already using the dietary supplement labeling database all the time.
Nobody's using that.
So, but are they going to use this? If the history is any predictor of the future, it's unlikely. But okay, I will say that conceptually, yeah, I suppose that's something. But or you could even just say on your label, yeah, this is listed in the database, and so maybe it would give them more trust.
Well, anybody who's selling products, the product brands themselves can say we're listed in the mandatory product listing database with the FDA.
Yeah, but maybe that would give them,
and that would give it's almost like a third-party certification for testing for label claim and safety, right? It meets label claim and it's safe. So NSF, USP, other organizations do that, but not a lot of products use those services as third-party testing, right? So that is one way to increase consumer confidence there. So one additional thing is the only way it would increase consumer confidence here for that is that the consumers would be thinking, how was I trying to say here? The other way that the consumers would help them is if the FDA actually made it public that they have this database and they're getting consumers to follow that, right? So it would have to be not just the product brands, but the FDA being more visible about that, because like I said, I seriously doubt very many consumers even know about the dietary supplement label database. Okay. They don't even know that's there. And actually, how does that really help a consumer? Okay, it's listed in there, but it hasn't been evaluated. So that doesn't mean that it's actually a good product, right? That it's safe because, like I said, tianeptine is actually listed in the database there. So nobody screened those and evaluated those labels there. So again, the last point here in consumer confidence is trust in the market, right? So increased transparency. Yes, it would be increased transparency. Again, but only if the resources were there for the FDA to do the evaluation piece and to respond to industry, right? And the consumers knowing that interaction happens would give better consumer trust there, right, in the market. And so what a consumer could do you'd have to do, look, just like marketing anything, right, Gene? You'd have to do a campaign to market and say there's this database. If you need to check to see if this product's listed, we've evaluated it, then you go there. You're going to spend the money.
They don't even have the money now to have enough people to do the jobs they're supposed to do. Are they going to earmark money for a marketing campaign?
Yeah, no. And that's what it would take to really build that consumer confidence there, I think. So anyway, so let's, what's our time look like? We're okay. So let's run through the arguments against, because we've kind of covered some of this already as we were going back and forth in this. But so here's the arguments. Okay, increased costs are a couple points here. So Is it really? I don't
Yeah,
know.
no. Look, is it going to increase costs? If all you're doing is kind of uploading data,
Not
yes, you
really.
have to have somebody
Somebody do
dedicated to
that. Yeah.
do that. But that's not a full-time job. It's not like you're coming out with products
No.
constantly. So, I don't see that as
This
a
is what.
real
Yeah. This
administrative
is.
burden.
I don't see it either, and I know this is an argument many of the trade associations make, especially for small or medium-sized manufacturers. I'm sorry, if you're $100 million company, you don't submit your structure function claims today. It didn't take that much to actually send the information in. Okay,
No,
so
it didn't. Look, I would say if suddenly it became a law, and let's say you had
yeah,
100 products you had to list, yeah, it's going to be a little arduous in the beginning. But after it's done, I mean, how many products are you
well,
introducing a year that this is going to be an issue for? I don't see
exactly. Yeah,
that. And
that's right. Factor that in too. How many times are you doing? You're not doing this on a daily basis, right? You're not doing it even
yeah, and they're
monthly,
saying, well, this additional cost could relate to higher prices for consumers.
and
Really?
actually potentially driving people out of business. I don't buy it.
No, I don't think so either. If
No.
the only real sort of burden, and I will admit this would be a burden, is initially. If you don't list it now, and you've got 100 products or 300
Oh yeah,
products,
then that's going to take.
that's a burden initially. But if you set aside the initial requirement
Yeah.
and say what is it on an ongoing basis,
Mhm.
it's not that huge. So I don't know.
And I guess the the corollary to that is higher prices for consumers. Well, those costs would get passed on. Well, first of all, I don't think the costs are that high, so I don't think that changes that honestly. Even though that's a negative that the industry associations have talked about, higher
No,
price for dietary supplements. Well, dietary supplements right now are pretty expensive. Okay, so inflation's higher, this sort of thing. So
I don't know. Maybe there's something we're not factoring in. But listen, we've both been doing this for a long time,
yeah,
and there's lots of things I've had to submit and upload and do things for, and
yeah.
it's just one more thing you got to tick
Oh,
off the list. Not a big
and
deal.
and it's not, and again, it's not like you're doing it all the time. It's not like you're
No,
launching new products every day. Okay, then you need a dedicated person, but that's not really true. So anyway, I've been doing this for years, just like Eugene and other countries, and where it requires more stuff. Even that doesn't require a lot of time to submit that documentation. All right, so the second thing is regulatory overreach, and there's 2 points here. So I think the regulatory overreach is coming from the negative on the MPL because of the way the bills are being put forth by Durbin, which are more broader, trying to rope in other things. And that's true. It should be focused particularly on what it's supposed to do that's going to help the consumers with the right resources. And if you did that, okay, then then it's not regulatory overreach. So stifling innovation. Some people argue that that increased regulatory requirements could stifle innovation. Come on.
okay. So what? Let me tell you what went into my mind when I saw that. I went, oh, that means that you can't use a disallowed ingredient. That means that you can't use a nutraceutical that's not a dietary ingredient that you shouldn't be using. That's going
In
to
the
stifle
first
your
place.
innovation. If
Yeah.
it's a legit ingredient, if it's
Yeah.
an ODA, an ODI, an NDI, or GRAS,
Yeah.
it's fine. Go ahead and use it. If it's not one of those, you
Right.
shouldn't be using it anyway. And so I don't want to
Right.
hear your bellyache about it's going to stifle your innovation because you can't do something illegal.
And,
So
and
so
I'm sorry, I have my own opinion about some companies that don't even know how to innovate. Okay, they're the ones that are marketing companies that don't even have science teams seen this as well.
oh no.
And
I have seen
and
this repeatedly, just like you, and I know that it bothers us both. We want to see it done right.
yeah,
There's so many products out there that make arduous and egregious claims.
yeah. And then bureaucratic inefficiency. Okay, there's some argument for this because I don't think the FDA government's never going to be efficient. In fact, by the way, no regulatory organization I've ever dealt with in multiple countries that I've taken products to is ever efficient. Okay, it's an
But
oxy.
this one I completely agree with,
Yeah,
because concerned that they don't have the resources for the capacity.
exactly.
That is one of my. If I had to list my top 2 or 3 concerns, that'd be like right there.
Yeah,
You don't have the ability to do this. You don't have the ability to do it right. That's my big concern.
me too. And so again, this would lead to bureaucratic efficiencies for sure. If there's no funding in there to accommodate the people who are going to evaluate all the claims, and by the way, imagine the resources it's going to take initially from T0 for 100,000 products to get listed.
Yeah.
I mean, this is on a scale much larger, where I've seen it with the companies, like I said, that didn't submit their claims and stuff like that. And we had to put together several month programs of what it was going to take to get all their product SKUs listed. It was going to take time. So it's the same thing here. If there's got to be a lot of money budgeted up front, and then from a maintenance standpoint, it doesn't take that much then, right? There's not like there's a ton of products.
The maintenance isn't the issue. It's the
maintenance
initial.
is not the issue. It's the initial, pull the trigger on it sort of thing. There's going to take a period of time before they could to capture all those products and get everybody submitted.
So how about this next one? How about the privacy and proprietary concerns? So manufacturers requiring to disclose proprietary information about their formulas, potentially risking their competitive edge. Okay. So one of the things here is DSHEA allows for proprietary blends, and the idea was to protect your intellectual property. Okay. Unfortunately, the way that it's come out to be is proprietary blends have mostly become an excuse for fairy dusting and putting in a bunch of stuff that does absolutely nothing.
Absolutely.
So it's like, hey, how can we fool consumers into thinking there's something in here that's good for them when there's not, or there's not enough of something. So to me, if I today, people probably are going to like that I said this, but if I could get rid of proprietary blends, I would, unless they've got a study on the proprietary blend, because I think that it's just garbage. So
actually, look, the number of product brands, let's be honest, that actually has, now there's research on ingredients and there's branded ingredients that are clinically studied, and give many examples of that. Okay, you put it together in a blend, so-called formulators that are really marketers, mix together a bunch of stuff, don't understand the science maybe on each of those ingredients. So again, it's a much more difficult question. Now we're tapping into the area of efficacy, right? So whether or not they're disclosing, we're not talking about that. Mandatory product listing is not addressing does it our actual product works for you. So this shows all the proprietary blend, but you're right. A lot of companies do that, and to obfuscate that they're not putting enough of any of the other ingredients, and then they're making claims around that. So that's a different story.
And that's an issue. So, I mean, again, I'm not even clear that on mandatory product listing, you'd have to list each ingredient in the proprietary blend.
I wasn't clear on that either, in terms of basic information. So let's, if we play devil's advocate, think of this for a second here. How many companies actually have research on a proprietary blend, clinical research? Very few.
I would say extremely few. I am aware
very few. I mean, think of the product as a whole. No.
No. And I know some raw material suppliers that have pre-blends that have had studies done on them, and in which case you could list those in a proprietary blend, and that's kind of legit.
So look, here's how you solve this. If a company has a proprietary blend where they've done research on it, okay, we can take this argument away. Then they should patent that, or have some sort of
some
legal
kind of designation, legal designation that this has actually had research done on it.
Right. Then that's a different story. How's that? Then nobody can infringe upon that. Then
if you say, look, I'm going to use these 5 herbs, and these 5 herbs, let's say each herb is in research was shown to be effective at 100 milligrams. So your proprietary blend has 500 milligrams. You actually have the correct amount of each. If you actually could show that you have a proprietary blend that is true, and you just don't want everybody to know how much you used of each because that's your, then again, there could be a mechanism by which that's reviewed and said, okay, fine, you could keep it secret because you're using something real. But that's never going to happen.
But again, very few companies have done that.
No.
And so I don't think it's as big an issue as the industry makes it. So data security. So this is the other point under privacy and proprietary concerns. So ensuring the security of the data that's collected through the MPL, could be challenging. Well, initially, like we talked about, if you have the resources and having the database created, okay, this is a big deal. And then this raises concerns about potential breaches or misuse of proprietary information. Well, again, we've just called out, well, how many things are actually really proprietary in the first place? Okay, if you do have something that's really proprietary, you have your own research, the company should be legally protecting that in a way as well.
So they're not necessarily uploading that to for the mandatory product listing. So I'm not sure what it is that's, but whatever. Let's look at other the category of questionable benefits.
Yes. Okay? Last point on against MPL. Okay. Yeah. So go ahead.
Limited impact on safety. Some critics argue that mandatory product listing may not significantly enhance consumer safety, as most reputable manufacturers already comply with existing regulations and best practices. A lot of them don't, though, do they, Bill?
No, they don't. So I already said this earlier. I've had first-hand experience in this, and I won't call out brands or names. Shame on them. But come on, guys, follow the regs we do have today. Then maybe the politicians like Durbin won't come back at us with something that's ridiculous for a listing because they say it's unregulated. Well, come on. It's not the Wild West anymore. This is a sophisticated industry. It's evolved. More and more people are doing research. Okay, so treat it that way. And again, there's a lot of companies that don't do that. So we can move on to that. So the other thing is alternative measures. So the opponents to suggest that there are less burdensome ways to achieve the goals of MPL, such as improving existing regulatory frameworks and enhancing consumer education. Well, we already said that. There's not enough consumer education, first of all, from the FDA, right? So
that is true.
There's not. And then again, this goes back to resources to implement this sort of thing, especially T0. And then to educate, there's got to be an ongoing program to educate the consumers about this. So again, that takes dollars, just like marketing anything. It takes dollars to do that. And I don't think regulators are in the business of marketing anything. Okay, they don't really do that a very, very good job of that in the first place.
No.
So in terms of alternative measures, I don't see that there is any really, even though that's a negative. Like, okay, what? Nobody suggests what is that then? You can't use the existing things we already have. We've already called out why.
If you could actually improve.
If you could improve the current...
The existing, and that's mostly by providing funding to the agencies so they can enforce regulations.
Again, it's fun. It's funding. So to me, it seems like there doesn't need to be whole new legislation. You just update the whole structure function claim piece of this to submit a few other additional bits that everybody's supposed to be doing.
And get proper fundings to the agencies so they can do the investigations they're supposed to do and aren't able to,
Yeah. So let's wrap it up here and with some kind of conclusions on the point here. So again, this debate over mandatory product listing is going to involve really balancing out. It has to be a win-win for both the regulators and the industry. Okay, let's be fair. Okay, it's got to be. And both parties have to come to the table and be honest about from their side. And not, I have to say it, I see inflamed opinions from both sides of the aisle.
You're going to have whenever from the politician side, they're politicians. They're trying to impress their constituents. They're trying to get some attaboys and good jobs and all the stuff from that side. So that's going to be their issue. And from the other side, again, everybody's like, I want to avoid all this. I don't want anything else, blah, 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 whether it's good or not. I don't want anything else. Okay. Like you said, you got to meet somewhere in the middle.
You got to meet somewhere in the middle here.
If you're going to do it.
If you're going to do it. So again, I think Gene and I have already said that we're in favor of some sort of product listing, which is an enhancement of what the information that we already submit to FDA normally. That makes sense. Again, need resources. If you don't have the resources, it's a non-starter. I don't care what the legislation is. And will it really stop all the bad actors? It will minimize it a little bit, but not really. You're still going to have that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all for anything that can help to reduce the bad actors, as long as it doesn't have a negative impact on the good actors, and as long as it actually does something real.
Exactly. And anyway, so I think in the end, maybe the thing we should do, Gene, maybe we should do it. I mean, I know the trade associations are fighting for their members who pay money to have membership to the trade association. So they're going to do their job of protecting the industry, that sense. But maybe we need an impartial group to put together the no nonsense legislation that's not influenced by either side, that says, okay, this is what makes sense. I know you and I could draft that.
Oh,
maybe
totally.
We could totally draft that. You know what? Maybe we should do that. We should put forward that and put it out to all the trade associations. But I know the trade associations, NPA had their fly-in day to Washington, D.C. I don't know what really, I'm not a member of NPA, so I don't know if the information they gather from those trips actually does anything to help the industry or protect it. Maybe a little bit. It is about being visible in front of people. But if you have inflammatory rhetoric from your side criticizing the FDA all the time, you're not going to meet halfway with the politicians and what makes sense. And the fact still remains, we do have bad actors on the market. We do have people that get hurt about that.
And let's be honest. And let's be honest. At the time when DeShay was in play, you actually had people in Congress who, from both sides of the aisle, could meet in a bipartisan way and have some agreement on something. I'm not so sure that nowadays, with the divisiveness of our Congress and our Senate, that anybody is going to get together and agree on anything just because they don't want to agree with the other side on anything.
Right. So again, it is going to remain a hot topic for some time, Gene, I think. And I think the only way it's going to get resolved where it's just like any business deal that I've done. It's a basic philosophy. It has to be a win-win for both sides. Okay. Right. You gotta compromise and meet somewhere in the middle on that. And maybe it takes almost like a mediator between the trade association and the politicians to say, okay, guys, nope, that's too much of what you want. That's too conservative, or, you know what I mean? Maybe it takes that. I'm just throwing it out there as an idea. Hey, if anybody's listening and thinks it's a good idea, reach out to Jeannie and I, and maybe we'll do that.
Maybe.
We could do it. All right. That wraps it up for this really hot topic. It was a fun discussion today, Gene.
It was.
And definitely reach out.
We got to criticize both sides of the aisle.
So industry, come on, guys, step up to the plate, do the right thing, get reasonable, check your egos at the door. Okay. Yes, you have to fight for things you're being doing, but don't spend all your time fighting. Let's just try and get reasonable in there. Then maybe the politicians might actually listen. I don't know. I don't trust politicians either.
Yeah, the politicians on that side, the problem is that even if our industry does what it's supposed to do, I'm just not so convinced that it's going to have an impact.
Yeah. And again, let's not lose sight of what the real goal here is. And that is, it's all about the consumer here. One thing that bugs the hell out of me is to see not just bad actors, but companies who market products that I know are the consumers are wasting their money and they're garbage and they don't do anything for them. I have a real problem with that. So,
do you know, the other day I saw a friend of mine texted me with a link, and she said, is this any good? And it was a social media ad for a certain brand of mushroom tea. You had somebody standing there looking like, oh, look, I got thin by drinking mushroom tea a couple times a day. It's like, oh my God, I know that garbage product. They also made outrageous claims about no more inflammation and just one garbage claim after the other. They didn't have enough of anything in that formula to do anything. And you see that all the time, and I wish they would go away. And that's the thing that I despise, is what gives our industry a bad name. Those are the bad players you want to get rid of.
Yeah. Now, I have a solution for that, and I'm developing that. That's my other venture.
I know you are.
So That's going to
don't give too much away.
I'm not giving too much away in that, but we're developing the prototype right now. It's a technology play, and it's going to change the way we think about the industry. And it actually is really to support consumers in a sense. So, because again, think about it. How does a consumer know? Really, at the end of the day, I don't care.
They don't. And guess what?
Don't.
All the good players are going to love this, and all the bad players are going to hate it.
Are going to hate it. So, and I'm not telling you any more about that because you're going to have to stay tuned for that. Because when I do it, it's going to be a big deal. So, with that, let's take us out, Gene. We'll see you next time in a couple of weeks here on the Bioactive Nexus. Don't know what we're going to talk about, Gene, but we'll put out a notice about that when it comes. And hopefully we know where we're going to do the live broadcast at Supply Side West. That'll be fun.
That'd be nice.
Yeah. All right, guys. Take care.